If you have ever walked down the skincare aisles and tried to choose skincare products based on whether or not you have dry skin, oily skin, sensitive skin, or combination skin, perhaps you believe that if you can only figure out what your skin type is, that's going to be the key to choosing the right products for you and building the perfect skincare routine. And you may think even that this is firmly rooted in some kind of dermatologic science that we're taught in residency as dermatologists, and that if you could only figure it out, then that's the secret to skincare success. And to a certain extent, yes, there is some science there. Some people certainly do have oily skin. Certain products are less agreeable. But a big chunk of the skin type is marketing from the skincare industry. And in this video, we're gonna do a deep dive on the history of the first dermatologist-developed skincare brand, Clinique, how it got started. We're gonna talk about their iconic three-part skincare system tailored for their 4 skin types. Indeed, a dermatologist was in fact involved in the development of Clinique. Clinique has been around since 1968, and prior to that, throughout the 60s, skincare was largely this kind of one-size-fits-all cream approach. Definitely did not have anywhere near the scope of product selections that we do today. Much of skincare was predominantly found in high-end department stores. Carol Phillips, the editor of Vogue at the time, really believed that skincare should not be this one-size-fits-all approach, and that it should be more tailored based on your individual skin needs. Through her research, she came across a very prominent dermatologist, Dr. Norman Orentreich. Dr. Norman Orentreich was not just anybody. This guy was a legend. He innovated, pioneered so many different treatments, medicinals, and techniques. He definitely is a legend in dermatology. As a matter of fact, Dr. O is the inventor of the hair transplant. He is credited for coming up with the hair transplant. He developed that as a resident physician. While he was in training, he pioneered the hair transplant. So definitely a legend in the realm of hair restoration. After he finished his residency, he went on to go into practice in the Upper East Side of Manhattan along with his partner. This guy actually pioneered the use of intralesional steroid injections for the treatment of things like psoriasis, alopecia areata, and scars, and that is still a mainstay treatment to this day in dermatology. Dr. O, along with his partner, is also really well known for advancing dermabrasion, for resurfacing scars. So he was not just some nobody dermatologist looking for clout, looking for fame. He had a lot of accolades already, and he also worked on the development of the iconic, still used to this day, still recommended to this day, Head and Shoulders shampoo. He worked with Procter & Gamble to develop at the time, the #1 selling shampoo. We still recommend it to this day for the treatment of dandruff. So this was not just some random Joe Schmo looking for clout from magazine editors looking for fame. Carol Phillips came across Dr. O through her research, and allegedly at the time, Dr. O was working on pioneering a 3-step skincare system for his patients that was based on cleansing, exfoliating, and moisturizing. But at the time, that was very innovative. He really believed that maintaining a skincare routine really could influence the health of your skin long term. If you just stayed consistent with performing a very basic routine of cleansing, exfoliating, and moisturizing twice a day, that was really going to be the secret to healthy skin long term. He had this idea that there was a difference between people who had a skincare routine that they were consistent with and people who did not. And that at baseline, you probably couldn't tell any difference between the two people just looking at them. But if you could follow them over time, the person who was consistent with their skincare routine, you would definitely appreciate over time a substantial difference. That was something that he believed. And again, at the time, he was allegedly developing a 3-part skincare system for his patients that would be individualized to their skin care needs. Carol Phillips reached out to him, interviewed him for an editorial that was published in Vogue in August of 1967. This ended up being a landmark editorial in Vogue that caught the attention of a lot of people. A lot of people were very engaged with it. Again, this is 1967, pre-social media days, so magazines were the TikTok of today. It was titled, "Can Great Skin Be Created?" And it was really kind of laid back, but also provided a lot of education. She asked him questions about cleansing, but specifically it caught the attention of one Leonard Lauder, the son of renowned Estee Lauder. At the time, Leonard Lauder wanted to branch out from his mother's eponymous Estee Lauder line and create something new and innovative. He wanted to venture with a more modern, innovative feel to it that would attract the attention of a younger consumer demographic who at the time was starting to ask more questions about skincare. You hear that a lot actually about today's generation, about Gen Z, that they want a lot more science-based. But truthfully, that was something that the younger generation at that time likewise was really asking. I think it's true of every generation. Where you're gonna plunk down a lot of change, you start asking a lot of questions early on, and then you form your opinion and move on. But they use that as a marketing tactic. This new generation wants science-based information. Well, I think we've always wanted the truth. So he really liked this article, and he actually took Carol Phillips out to lunch and convinced her to start the brand that would later go on to become Clinique. And 12 months later, boom, you have Clinique. It was launched in New York's Saks Fifth Avenue. It was actually Leonard Lauder's wife, Evelyn, who came up with the name Clinique. Previously, she traveled to Paris, and at the time she noticed in Paris these cliniques where Parisians were going in and getting facials. She felt that the name would really suit the brand well, giving it this image of something clinical, but also have that Parisian sophistication. And then the packaging, which still to this day I think they use, although I haven't seen it as much, was this calming green, pale green color. Pale green, as a side note, is known to be very calming, and it had this clinical feel to it. Clinique as a brand really did a lot in terms of creating the idea that we needed to have a skincare routine. Prior to that, this was not something that people really thought about. Of course, there was no talk of sunscreen, one of the most important aspects of any skincare routine, but you have to remember, this was, 1968, 1970, and at the time, sunscreen was very bare bones. Didn't offer actually the best protection. So they were really going for this very clinical image. And they also heavily marketed this as having a science behind it and being dermatologist-developed. Dr. O was involved in the development of the products and their iconic skin type solutions. Yeah, you would go into a Clinique counter, and part of their image was that the salespeople would all wear these crisp white lab coats, kind of giving it that science-backed, medical grade, if you will, image of branding. They're just salespeople though in white coats. They're not actual, clinicians. They really leaned in heavily to the idea of this being the first dermatologist-developed skincare brand, and that really is what helped them excel, I believe. It lended them a lot of credibility in the eyes of the consumers at that time, and it still works to this day. Again, Dr. O's thing at the time was this 3-step skincare system was creating for his patients allegedly. So with Clinique, they had these little levers that you would pass back and forth with these series of questions to determine your skin type. And they had 4 skin types. Very dry to dry with skin type 1, dry combination with skin type 2, combination oily with skin type 3, and oily with skin type 4. But truthfully, there's no science behind these skin types. It was an idea that Dr. O had and was developing, but there really isn't any true science rooted in these skin types. For example, I pointed this out in other videos before, but the concept of combination skin, it's not very scientific. There are a lot of skin conditions where you have patches of dryness and oiliness, maybe like seborrheic dermatitis, rosacea, but as a concept, combination skin, it's kind of nebulous. And oily skin can be influenced by hormones. It's not something that you maybe necessarily have oily skin every single day. Maybe it's just during certain times of the month around the menstrual cycle. Do you have atopic dermatitis and dry skin? Do you have keratosis pilaris, a dry skin condition? Do you have rosacea, which is sensitive skin? So there are a lot of skin conditions where you could start to pin yourself in these categories. And it's like, well, maybe tweaking these other things outside of your skincare routine actually are what's going to help you out more so than anything. So the skin type thing is honestly not something that really comes into play much when we're talking about dermatology and dermatologic care. While Dr. O is credited for influencing Clinique towards the skin types, Skin typing is actually a lot more reminiscent of something that was pioneered by cosmetic company tycoon Helena Rubinstein in the 1940s. Helena Rubinstein is another legend in the skincare industry, and her skin typing preceded Dr. O in the, back in the 40s. She had the dry, sensitive, oily combination. So the Clinique thing is actually kind of similar to that, but it was influenced by Dr. O. To what extent Rubinstein influenced Dr. O, that I don't know. Now, regardless of who came up with skin typing, it does end up often being largely marketing, because if you're somebody whose skin tends towards dryness, you may think that certain products that are marketed for oily skin are just not going to be suitable for you, or you may worry like, is this good for me? Is this good for me? And sometimes you just have to try them out regardless. So it really is not as simple as putting yourself in a box of a certain skin type. The other thing about the origins of Clinique is that in addition to having the image of being very clinical, having the dermatologist backing, the packaging being more streamlined, almost having a sterile appearance, and the idea of promoting to people that they needed a skincare routine to build a habit of doing it as a regimen. The other big thing about Clinique is that they really pushed that their products would be fragrance-free. Probably influenced to a certain extent by Dr. O, knowing that fragrance is a very common cause of contact dermatitis, problems in skincare, something he probably observed clinically. That was a big thing that Lauder wanted with Clinique, was for it to be totally fragrance-free. But the other major, probably the main overriding reason why they wanted it to be fragrance-free is so that they could market it as something so different from the Estee Lauder products, because it would really set them apart. Estee Lauder products were heavily scented and still are, and this would give it more of that medicinal, clinical feel to it, to not have fragrance. As in you're doing something more medicinal for your care that's going to promote health, as opposed to more of a luxury experience. So it really, I think, the origins of fragrance-free and Clinique were more so heavily influenced just out of a desire to separate it from Estee Lauder, because they really wanted a multi-brand company at that time. That was the goal of Leonard Lauder. So that's a little bit about the history of Clinique and the skin types. But to remind you guys, dermatologist-developed, clinically tested, and fragrance-free, they're not always 100% truths. They're not regulated terms. So there's a lot of variance in what that means. Sometimes it means nothing. Sometimes there's a bit of truth to it. But don't hang your hat on it being something that you can always count on setting a product apart from something else. Anyways, you guys, let me know in the comments below if you ever went to a Clinique counter and did the little sliding back and forth. Did you have that soap that came in the green packaging? I did. And yeah, I mean, it certainly is a legendary brand in the realm of skincare, and one that truly was developed in partnership with a dermatologist, although Dr. O did not put his name to the brand. He certainly was a legend in his own regard, though, with all of his advancements, development in dermatology. So I hope this video was fun, informative for you guys, a little history lesson. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and as always, don't forget, sunscreen and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.